Hello, welcome to Algebra 1 with Miss Andrea. We're continuing on in our describing data unit, which happens to be Module 8, and it's listed online as Unit 6. And we're in the second half of it, so 8b or 6b, and we're going to be on the second page. So this is Lesson 2. And today we're going to get into some tables, how to create tables, how to create what they are, things like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is some numerical data. Numerical data is quantitative. It's something that can be measured by numbers like temperatures, sales, things like that. Categorical data is going to be things that you don't necessarily have numbers for. So like shirts, do you like hot dogs? Yes or no? What's your favorite color? Blue or red? So that's your information. Numerical data, categorical data. Numerical data, anything that basically can be represented with a number. Categorical, things that can't be represented by a number. Frequency. So frequency is how often something happens. So if I asked people some categorical data, like what is your favorite color? And 10 people said blue, 5 people said red, 12 people thought out of the box and said pink. So frequency would be those numbers, that numerical data of how frequently a certain number appeared. So how many people said red, how many people said blue. That's the frequency. Now, relative frequency is when you take that total amount of people who said something and divide it. Well, so like the total number of people who said red was their favorite color, and divided it by what your total number of people you asked was. So that would be your relative frequency. So here's an example of a frequency table. Now we kind of got into this in the last session, our first half of the unit, we talked about frequency tables. So this is a person who took a survey of people, maybe at a food court, and said, what is their preferred food? And they totaled, in total, they surveyed 40 people. Okay. The frequency of people who said pizza was that 18 of these people said pizza. 12 of these people said burgers, and 10 said something else. We don't know. Maybe they said French fries. Who knows? But there wasn't enough information to give it its own category, so we lumped it all together in other, because we're really only concerned with pizza and burgers. Which one's more popular, pizza or burgers? Okay. Now, this is a frequency table. So a relative frequency table is when we take these numbers, 18, and divide by the total, 40. 18 divided by 40, 12 divided by 40, 10 divided by 40. And we get percentages or proportions. Okay, so in relation to, that's why it's relative, in relation to the total number, what's the frequency? So, oops. I thought I had a frequency table to show you, but I don't. Let's go ahead and, you know what? Let me grab my calculator. Oh, here it is. So if we were to take 18 divided by 40, we'd get 0.45. So we could say 40%. Or 0.45, so 0.45%, okay? And then 12 divided by 40, you get 0.3, so that's 30%. 10 divided by 40 is 25%. Now your total, when you add all these up, 45 plus 30 plus 25 should always come to 100%. Okay, if you've done your math correctly, that's a way to check your math. So this is the relative frequency. And if I had this in a table instead of just, underneath the table, it would be a relative frequency table. All right, so now we're going to talk about a two-way frequency table. So what we looked at in the last one, let's go back. Let's look at this back just one. Let's see if we can go back. This only has one type of data. Everybody only has to fit into one, pizza, burgers, or other. But a two-way frequency table would be like if you also categorize whether they were male or female. So you would have how many males like pizza, how many females like pizza, those kind of things. So your data has to meet two conditions for a two-way frequency table. That makes sense, right? All right, so here we go. We've got girls and boys and pizzas, burgers, and others. So this must be, instead of at a food court, maybe like at a school cafeteria. All right. So if you notice, this two-way table is not complete. We have our preferred food, pizza, burgers, other, and total is missing. We have our genders, girl, boy, and total is also missing. So we need to go ahead and total both of these up. So how many total girls were surveyed? Well, there was 16. How would I know that? 8 plus 7 plus 1 equals 16. If I added all these together, it would equal 16, right? 10 plus 5 plus 9 is going to equal 24. Now it's going to go down the same way for the columns. 8 plus 10 is going to be 18. 7 plus 5, 13. No, 12. Oops. 9 plus 1, 10. Now, when you add these this direction and you add these this direction, we should get the exact same number. 16 plus 24 is 40. And then I need to go ahead and add these green ones here just to make sure I get the same number, to make sure I've done everything correct. 18 plus 12 plus 10 is also 40. So I've completed my two-way frequency table, okay? So 40 is this added together as well as this added together, and you should get the same number. Let's see if I have another thing. Yep. All right, so how many total girls took part in the survey? So girls, you go to the total. There were 16 girls took part in the survey. How many total boys took part in the survey? You're going to find your boy row, go all the way to the total column, and there were 24 boys. Why should your answers from 1 and 2 add to 40? 16 plus 24. Why should they add to 40? Because there were 40 people surveyed. Boys and girls. That's all the people. We didn't interview anyone who wasn't a boy or a girl. All right. So then what happens is we want to get to some relative frequencies. Remember, we talked about relative frequency being the proportion of information. So a couple of things I want to review here. We have right here, this is our joint frequencies. Remember? And then what were these totals called? Do y'all remember what those were called? They had a special name as well. They were the marginal frequencies. And I'm reminding you of that for a reason, because we're going to get into some joint relative frequencies. Where do you think those are going to go? They're going to go right here in the center of the data where our joint frequencies went. That's where our joint relative frequencies are going to go. And then what do you think these things out here on the side are going to end up being called? They're going to be called our marginal relative. I spelled relative wrong right there. It's supposed to be an A, frequencies. Okay, so all of these are dependent on our grand total. Okay, now let's get to adding. All right, 8 plus 7 plus 1. Oh, we already answered all these. What was this again? I don't remember. 8 plus 7 plus 1 was 16. 10 plus 5 plus 9 was 24. This was 18. This was 12. This was 10. And then our grand total was 40, right? Okay, awesome. So Now, in order to find the joint relative frequencies, because this is going to be our relative frequency table. This was just our two-way frequency table. Now you have to have your two-way frequency table in order to figure out what your relative frequency table is. That's why it's listed here as well. So now that we have this, we need to figure out what is going to be, and I think I'm going to do my joint frequencies in blue because yellow is a little hard to see. But what you do is you take your joint frequency, which for this first box is 8, and you're going to divide that by your grand total, which is 40 every time, right? So 8 divided by 40. 8 divided by 40 is 0.2. So this is 20%. Okay. Then you're going to, for the burgers, you're going to do 7 is our number that we have here. Girls who like burgers is 7. And what are you going to divide it by? Your grand total, 7 divided by 40. That's 1.175. So 0.175. So it's going to be 17.5%. And then other is 1. And we're going to divide that by 40 and we get 0.025. So 1 divided by 40 is going to be 2.5%. Now, when we do, let me switch over to orange, the marginal frequency, it's going to happen the exact same way. So you're going to take the marginal frequency, and to find the marginal relative frequency, you're going to divide by, guess what? The grand total. So 16 divided by 40. And I get 0.4. So that's 40%. Now, if you want to check that and make sure you got that correct, we can add up those joint relative frequencies, and they should equal our marginal relative frequency. So I'm going to add up my 20% plus my 17.5% plus my 2.5%. And what do I get? I get 40%. So you can see that that is a check to make sure you got it correct. All right, so now boys, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm not going to write it out since you already got the idea. I have 10 boys who like pizza, so I'm going to take 10 and divide by 40, and I get 25%, or 0.25, which is 25%. For boys who like burgers, it's 5 divided by 40, and I get 0.125, so it's 12.5%. And then there's 9 boys who don't like pizza or burgers. They prefer something else. I'm going to divide that by 40 and I get 22.5%, or in my calculator, it actually says 0.225. And then to get my joint frequency here, or excuse me, my marginal frequency, I'm going to take this number 24 and divide it by 40. And I get 60%. Okay. Now, in order to get these marginal relative frequencies, I do the same thing. I'm going to do 18 divided by 40, and I get 45%. And if you added up 20% and 25%, you would get 45%. So that looks like it's going to be very accurate. So my next marginal relative frequency is the total number of burgers. So I've got 12, and I'm going to divide by my grand total of 40, and I get 30%. So for my next marginal frequency, I'm going to take the people who preferred other, no matter their gender. So right up here, 10, the total number of people who preferred other, and I'm going to divide by my grand total, which is 40. So 10 divided by 40, and I get 25%. Now, when I add these down and to the right, if we're talking about percentages, what should these add up to? Well, they should always add up to 100%. So our grand total should be 100%. It should be everybody who was surveyed and all the food that they preferred. Okay, so everybody who was surveyed would be our girls plus our boys. 40% plus 60% is going to be 100% right here. Oops, I'm supposed to write that in red. Let's change that for you. 100%. Then the total food that people liked is going to be when we add these frequencies together. So 45 plus 30 plus 25. And when I add all those together, I also get 100%. So our relative frequency table is filled in and it's correct. I verified it, the percentages, by doing all the addition. Now I have a relative frequency table for you to complete. Here's the data over here, the genders and the animals. So we took a survey of, I think it's 20 people, and whether they were male or female, and whether they had a cat or a dog. And you could have multiple cats, multiple dogs, but it's cat or dog or neither. Those are your choices. And so here is the data that was collected in our survey. And I want you to fill out your two-way frequency table and then go on to fill out your conditional frequency table. I'm going to go ahead and let you pause the video, fill this out, and then you can unpause and we'll get to it. All right, welcome back. Let's check and see how many people there were that were surveyed. I think it's 20, but I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10 genders, and there's 2 of them, so that's 20. There was 20 people surveyed in total. So our males plus our females equal 20. And if we count how many animals there were, cat, dog, and neither, it should also total 20, right? All right, so the first thing I want to look at is males who prefer cats. Males who prefer cats. So I've got 1, 2, 3 males who prefer cats. Okay, I'm going to switch to a different color here, and I want females who prefer cats. A female who prefers a cat right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 females who prefer cats. Now I'm going to go on to the dog. Males who prefer dogs. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I got them all. Let's go with 5 there. And females who prefer dogs. 1, 2, 3. I've got 3 females who prefer dogs. Now I'm going to look at my neither, people who prefer, don't have a preference for cat or dog. So let's look at male. There's 1, 2, 3 males who prefer neither. And then let's go with, let's see if I have another color here. Let's just, that's kind of a different color. 1, 2 females who have no preference. Okay, so we've gotten started filling out our two-way frequency table. Now to find our totals, we can just add these straight across. So 3 plus 5 plus 3 is 11. 4 plus 3 plus 2 is 9. Now to make sure I got it all correct, I'm going to add 11 plus 9 and see if I got 20. I did, good. All right, so 3 plus 4 is 7. 5 plus 3 is 8. And 3 plus 2 is 5. And then 7 plus 8 plus 5 is 20. So I verified that our frequency table is correct. And now we need to do our conditional frequency table. Okay, so remember, what's here is going to be what we call our joint relative frequency. Okay, and then on the outsides is the marginal relative frequency. And this is still just going to be our grand total. It should equal 100% when we're done, no matter what, if we did it correctly, right? Okay, so I'm going to start by doing my joint frequencies. I'm going to take 3, 3 divided by 20, and I get 15%. And then 5 divided by 20 is 25%. And 3 divided by 20, I already know that answer, 15%. 4 divided by 20 is 20%. 3 divided by 20 is 15%. And 2 divided by 20 is 10%. Now, let's look at some marginal frequencies. I've got 11 here. 11 divided by 20 is 55%. If I add those up, 15 plus 25 plus 15, I got 55, so that's correct. 9 divided by 20 is 45%. Now this time what I'm going to add is I'm going to add my totals down. 55 plus 45 gives me 100%. So far everything's lining up like it should. Let's go ahead with this total. 7 divided by 20 is 35%. Let's add those up. 15 plus 20 is 35, so we're good there. Our second one, 8 divided by 20 is going to be 40%. And then 5 divided by 20 is going to be 25%. Now I'm going to add these across the bottom. 35 plus 40 plus 25 is 100%. So my conditional frequency table is complete and correct. I have one more for you to do. This one doesn't have a table of data. It just tells you. So John took a survey of 50 random students. Okay, I already have some information I can fill in, right? I have my grand total. There was 50 total students. So male and female together, there was 50 of them. At his school, to determine his classmates' preferences of sports, given the following information, fill out a two-way frequency table. Okay, 28 boys were surveyed. All right, so I've got 28 boys. So that's going to go here in the total column of the male row. Okay, 6 girls preferred football. So 6 females preferred football. That goes right there. 8 preferred basketball. 8 females preferred basketball. Oops. I should be using a different color here because these are my joint frequencies. All right, 12 boys preferred football. 2 preferred softball. Okay. Now, that's all the data we're given. So we need to finish filling in this frequency table before we can create the conditional frequency table, right? So we have more than enough information to figure this out. So I'm going to put in pink the data that we were not given that we're going to have to figure out. The first thing I want to figure out here is we know how many total students were surveyed, and we know how many boys were surveyed. So how do we figure out how many girls were surveyed? We're going to do 50 minus 28. We get that there was a total of 22 females surveyed. Now, if there were 22 females surveyed, let's subtract out how many liked football and how many liked basketball, and that'll tell us how many liked softball here. So 22 minus 6 minus 8 is going to be 8. So there are 8 females who prefer softball. Now we can do the same thing with the males here. We've got 28 total males. Subtract out how many liked football and how many liked softball, and we'll figure out how many prefer basketball. And 28 minus 12 minus 2 is 14. Okay, now we can add together our columns to get these totals down here. 12 plus 6 is 18. 14 plus 8 is going to be 22. And 2 plus 8 is 10. And I want to confirm that by adding the total row across and making sure I still got to 50. So 18 plus 22 plus 10 is going to give me 50. And that is correct. Remember, these are the inside data that we have here. The two-way, the bivariate data is our joint frequencies. And then when we added those together and got our subtotals, these were our what? They're on the margins. These were our marginal frequencies. So when we fill out this table, we'll have joint relative frequencies here in the where the data was, and then we're going to have marginal relative frequencies out here in the margins where the subtotals were. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill out this chart of relative, our conditional frequency table. Ooh, this is not a conditional frequency table. This is just a frequency table that we're filling out. We haven't gotten to conditional frequency yet. That's the next slide. All right, so males. Let's see, 12 divided by 50 is 20.24, so 24%. Basketball, 14 divided by 50 is 28%. Softball, 2 divided by 50 is 4%. 6 divided by 50 for females who like football is 12%. 8 divided by 50 for females who prefer basketball is 16%. And females who prefer something else is going to be 16% as well. All right, so our marginal frequencies, we're going to do the male marginal frequency, 28 divided by 50 is 56%. I'm going to go ahead and check that. 24 plus 28 plus 4 is 56. So that's correct. All right. So my second marginal frequency, my female marginal frequency is going to be 22 divided by 50, which is 44%. And then my football marginal frequency is going to be 18 divided by 50, which is 36. And I'm going to check that by adding 24 plus 12 is 36. So that's correct. 22 divided by 50 is going to give me my basketball relative frequency, which is 44%. And then 10 divided by 50 is going to give me my softball relative frequency, which is 20%. I'm going to add my totals across the bottom, 36 plus 44 plus 20, and I got 100%. And I'm going to double check that by adding my total in the columns, my subtotals in the columns. 56 plus 44 is also 100%. 100%. So we have completed our frequency table. Again, this is not a conditional. I did not mean to put that there. Let's get to what a conditional frequency is. How about it? All right, so conditional relative frequencies have to do specifically with certain conditions. Our relative frequencies that we looked at before, joint relative frequency and marginal relative frequency, were all divided by the grand total. So whatever was in this column and row right here, whatever was in this cell. So when you divide by the grand total, you get the joint frequency and you get the marginal frequency. So relative frequency is only about this joint data here in the center, what we have filled in right now, okay? It's only going to be, let's see, it's only going to be this data, okay? And now your conditional relative frequency means you're going to take this number, this piece of data here, and you're going to either divide it by the total down here or the total over here. So you can have, let's go ahead and fill out this chart just so we can have some numbers. So 12 plus 13 plus 16 plus 4 is 45, right there. 3 plus 5 plus 5 plus 2 is 15. 12 plus 3 is 15. 13 plus 5, 18. 16 plus 5 is 21. And 4 plus 2 is 6. So 45 plus 15 is 60. And now I'm going to add across the bottom and make sure it still adds up to 16. So 15 plus 18 plus 21 plus 6 is 60 as well, and it verifies. All right, so now we have our frequency table completed. Now let's find some conditional relative frequencies. So you would take 12 and you could divide by 45, or you could take 12 and divide by 15. Those are both conditional frequencies. So any piece of joint frequency here in the data table. So 5, for example, you could divide by 2 different things to find a conditional frequency. You could divide 5 by 15 and find a conditional frequency, or 5 by 21 and find a conditional frequency. Okay. All right, so let's see what questions were asked. Find the totals for each row and column. We've already done that. Check. All right. Find the conditional relative frequency that students surveyed plays sports only, given that the student does have a job. All right, so these are the students that do have a job, and we want to know that the student survey does not have a, what is it? Plays sports only. Okay. So I'm going to put a box. It's helpful when you're doing this to take a piece of paper and cover up the data that you're not interested in, but it's going to be hard for me to cover up the data I'm not looking at on the screen. So instead I'll highlight it. Let's see, I should be able to highlight something. Let's highlight it. Okay, so let's see if this is going to work. So we want to know, okay, play sports only, given that the student does have a job. Since we're looking at the given, student does have a job, we're only going to be concerned with this row right here. So now what you have to look at is it says the student surveyed plays sports only. So now you look at the sports only section. So we're going to take this sports only 13 and we're going to divide by the total of does have a job. So the given is what you're going to highlight or leave uncovered, right? The whole row or column, the given statement. And then you're going to take the sports only, and that's going to be your numerator. And you're going to divide by the total in whatever column or row you have showing. So you're going to take your paper and cover up everything. Take your hand, a piece of paper, a book, something, and cover up all the data you're not interested in. And the row you're focusing on here is yes, they have a job. So we're going to divide by that total 45. 13 divided by 45 is 28.8%. 8 repeating percent. Okay, so they didn't tell us what to round to, so I'm going to round up and I'm going to say that's approximately 29%. All right, let me erase some of this and let's look at the next one. Find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed does not have a job given that the student participates in clubs only. So what's our given statement? Let's look at that one first. Given statement says that student participates in clubs only. So what I'm going to highlight here is the only thing we're going to be focused on, the only thing we're looking at. Go ahead and cover up the rest. If you should have this written down as an example in your notes. So what I want you to do is go ahead and take your hand and cover up the rest, or a piece of paper or something to cover up the rest of the data, because we're not concerned with the rest. Now that we've covered all that up, we want to find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed does not have a job. Does not have a job. And so that means we're going to look at this number 3 right here. Okay, so 3 divided by 15. Now, let's see, 3 divided by 15. So we took 3 and we divided by the total that in our column that's highlighted here. So 3 divided by 15, so that's 20%. All right, so the way that you would say this, since it was a word problem, I gave you the percentages, but I haven't actually told you how you would answer this. So 29% here is how many students, what percentage of students that don't have a job play sports only. Okay, so in this one, you'd say 20% of the students that participate in clubs only does not have a job. All right, so you start, your first statement is going to be that given statement, and your second one is going to be what you were looking for, the conditional relative frequency that you were looking for. Oops, I did not mean to erase all of that. All right, let's see. There we go. I only meant to erase this. Erased a little too much. Let's get that back. It was 15. All right. So now the next thing we're going to look at is our last question here. Find the conditional relative frequency that a student surveyed is involved in both clubs and sports. That given that the student does have a job. So our given is that the student does have a job. So we're going to look here at this row again. Now that we have our row highlighted, let's look at our second condition that has to be met. Our second condition was that a student surveyed is involved in both clubs and sports. So both. We're going to look at this number right here. So we're going to take 16 and we're going to divide by our total, which is 45. So 16 divided by 45 is going to be 35.5%. So that's approximately 36%. I rounded up. All right, so how you would answer this is you would say 36% of students that have jobs are involved in both clubs and sports. All right, so I've got just a review of the different types of relative frequencies that we covered. So I've got J's here, where it's the joint frequency. Remember, the joint frequency is the bivariate data that fits into both categories, like when we had shirts of a certain color or pants of a certain color. And then this is the marginal frequencies, right, on the sides. And I put, for these, I put M for marginal, but I put R in front of it because this is the marginal frequency of this row. And I put C here in front of it because this is the marginal frequency of this category. Now this is GT, stands for our grand total. Now, how do we find joint relative frequency? Our joint relative frequency was found by taking the joint frequency and dividing by the grand total. Excuse me here. This is supposed to be the J, and then dividing by our grand total. And that would give us our joint relative frequency. So any of these pieces of information divided by the grand total is going to give us our joint relative frequency. Okay, that's joint relative frequency. Now, what about your marginal frequency? Well, our marginal frequency, you could take, oops. All right, marginal frequency, you're going to take the row marginal frequency or the column marginal frequency, and you're going to divide either one of those by the grand total, okay? And that's how you're going to find your marginal relative frequency. So you're going to have this column marginal frequency divided by grand total, okay? Or you can have the row marginal frequency divided by the grand total. And that's how you're going to find the marginal relative frequency. Now, the last thing we need to look at is our conditional relative frequency. So this is when you have something that's going to be conditional. So you're going to look at just this row. So it would be the J divided by the CM, the column marginal frequency. The joint frequency, here's another one you could do. You could do a row. So you could do joint frequency divided by the row marginal frequency. So either of those will work, but you have to, it's conditional based on the row or the column that it's in. So you would never take like this joint frequency here and divide by this column marginal frequency here. So it has to be in the same row or the same column depending on what you were asked. So here's a summary of what the different frequencies that we looked at. The joint frequency is the joint relative frequency is the joint frequency divided by the grand total. Marginal relative frequency is the row marginal frequency or the column marginal frequency divided by the grand totals. Okay, now these two make up our relative frequency table. Okay, when we make a relative frequency table. The conditional relative frequency is conditional. It's based on what you're being asked for, okay? And it's the joint frequency data divided by the relative marginal frequency. And that's it for this lesson. You now have a practice assignment that you need to do. So I want you to go ahead and do your assignment, and we'll see you for the next